Join us and our friends as we fall down the rabbit hole of security wonder. If you're ready to see how deep it goes, you've found the right place. Pour your tea. You're not late for office hours. And now, our Red Queen, Tara Wheeler.
It is so wonderful to see you folks again this week. Fabulous. Again, as always, welcome to Red Queen and Friends. I'm Tara Wheeler, CEO of Red Queen Dynamics, and it is a joy and a pleasure to be joined this week with several guests. Oh my God, it's more than we've had before, and I am absolutely thrilled about it. I want to welcome Carlota Sage, the emotional support CISO and founder at Pocket CISO. I want to welcome Matt Garish at Focivity, vCISO extraordinary and to the stars. And as always, dear friend, colleague, and burden bearer extraordinaire, James Byerly, founder and consultant at Secure Point Solutions. James is with us this week from Deadwood. He's there at Wild West Hackfest, so it looks like we might get some killer questions from the show floor out there. Go tackle some vendors and get them in here.
Well, I might have set it up just perfect because I'm standing next to the line for lunch. Yeah. So I have essentially 900, security nerds. We're all hungry. I might be able to get an interesting question about compliance or small businesses or whatever the case may be.
I bet. All right. So it is a joy to have you all with us. And the only thing I'll ask you to do, James, I think you've already got it, is mute in the background because, 800 hackers, they make a racket when they're trying to find the lunch line. So
Definitely.
Carlota, so glad to have you with us. Tell us a little bit about who you
are,
what the hell you're doing here. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, all the things. I for folks who don't know me, I own a consulting company called Pocket CISO. We specifically serve sub 300 person organizations building security and compliance programs. I got my start doing about 17 years in IT and support operations for big tech companies like Netgear, Netflix, that sort of place, and a little company called FireEye that one day bought a company called Mandiant and became kind of big in that vendor space. I was on the IT operations team there. I accidentally took over the communities and got really into security. I have been doing the virtual CISO kind of thing for, 6 years now. And here I am.
Oh my gosh. It is so great to have you with us. Matt,
So
tell us a
happy.
little bit more about Focivity and what you're doing out there.
Yeah, I haven't been at this consulting thing quite as long as Carlota is. I started Focivity back in 2022. I left a CISO role to go into consulting. That kind of became my what's next. At the end of a 20 some odd year career in tech, from startups and IT operations and support infrastructure into DevOps and then into security. So it's been a wild ride. A lot of that time was spent working for vendors in the security space. I was at a security startup that was acquired by Juniper Networks, and then was lucky enough to be one of the group that was part of the group that was spun off to stand up Pulse Secure when Juniper Networks spun off our group then. So we got acquired and then spit back out. On the other side, I did that, ran IT infrastructure and operations at Pulse Secure for about 3.5 years before I went back to startups. We got too big and I want to go back to startups. So I love small business. So at Focivity, I really focus on small businesses. I try to stay like under 100. My heart really is in that like 1 to 20 or 30 person company that like the rest of the industry just doesn't even want to touch because they don't think that you can make any money doing that kind of stuff. And it takes a very small org to serve a very small org like that. So I stay independent and focus on the little guys.
I'm so glad to hear it. I know we all of us, I think, here have that passion for the smaller organizations. But one of the real challenges is kind of, I think, bringing attention to their unique needs. I mean, James has also been somebody who's really championed the needs of those kind of 1 to 20 businesses, even though we all say, that opportunity is there. At the point at which, you're a 300 to 500 person business, you've usually got that capacity at some point. I think it's unique, right? Some of the challenges that small businesses are facing, but that 1 to 20 organization, 99.4% of the businesses in the United States are between 1 and 20 people, right? Yeah. It's nothing but true.
It's like, so, yeah. What, 30 plus million of them?
It's 32 or 34 million total. Yeah.
It's
So
a mind-boggling number.
Yeah.
It's huge. Yeah, and one of the things that I saw just a day ago, actually, this came out. It's Small Business News, Repair Driver News. It's this national survey is describing the fact, and this is mind blowing for those of us who were just trying to get somebody inside a small business to pay attention a while back. People are actually afraid now in
Yeah.
terms of cyber attacks, and I'm super
Yeah.
curious. What would you folks say is the change? Why has this started to happen?
Okay, I'm going to jump in. I think it's because more and more businesses are relying on cloud services, right? So, even the mom and pop shops now are buying domain names. They're relying on Instagram and Facebook for their marketplace. Maybe they have Google Workspace or Microsoft, 365. So they're feeling that pain. They are actually feeling it a lot more keenly than they did a few years ago.
Yeah, and I think too the proliferation of sort of ransomware as a service platforms over the last several years is also like they're increasing their risks, or changing their risk model with use of cloud apps, and then you also have things making it easier for attackers to lowering the barrier of entry for attackers now who what used to take an awful lot of skill and organization. Now you just sign up for a subscription and hey, I'm elite. Not
Yeah.
really, but
But kind
it's
of.
impactful.
Yeah, and I mean, to put it in perspective for these a lot of these services that are operating out of emerging and developing countries, you know. I spend a lot of time in the Philippines. My mother's from there. I have a lot of family there, and to put it in perspective, the $120 massage that I get in California, that costs me $90, maybe $80 in North Carolina, cost me $20, right, in the Philippines. And that's to have somebody come to my house and give me a top level massage, right? So, that's a service. So those targeting those smaller businesses and looking for $300 to $500 ransomware, that's actually good money for an emerging or developing country, for a person in one of those countries.
One of the things that I know my lovely spouse talks about as he works in physical security
Hmm.
is to make sure that you're matching the your spend on your
Hmm.
risk at a
Hmm.
reasonable proportion, right? And one of the big
Hmm.
challenges I think we really have is small business getting attacked at the $300 to $500 amount, or the $1,000 to $5,000 amount, is protecting against a loss like that, which can be devastating. That's a couple of people's pay for a couple of months
Right.
inside a small
Right.
business. But what solution can you offer tiny businesses like this that is reasonable for
Hmm.
them to protect against these kinds of threats, right? That
Hmm.
that's proportional. You go to the big, endpoint providers, and all of a sudden you're looking at tens, 20, 40,
Hmm.
$60,000 a year just trying
Hmm.
to equip a business like this
Hmm.
without the expertise internally to manage it.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, the
Okay.
small businesses have no sticks, right? Yeah, they're relying on these much larger providers, and they're all individual voices, and there's not a collective that represents that small business concern to those larger companies, unless they're a very proactive company with a very proactive product team that
Mhm.
advocates, internally for that smaller customer. So I think that's a real concern for small businesses, is that they don't have leverage. Um, and any individual business that gets kind of mucked over there, they don't have a lot of options. I unfortunately have to say this to a lot of people who get their Instagram accounts taken over, small mom and pop retail shop. Somehow they get my number, and I'm like, I would love to help you, but the reality is I can help you before things happen. And once your account's been taken over, there's literally nothing I can do for you. And I don't have a stick to beat on Instagram or Facebook with either. So, there's I think a huge gap where I think the larger providers need to step up, but they don't really have a reason to. There's no monetary
Yeah.
incentive.
Yeah.
Well, right now they're
And a lot
mentioning
of
that
those.
many of these small businesses can't get cyber risk insurance, right?
Right.
So
Right.
that might be part of it.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And the vendors that we talk about too, like they put things like MFA and single sign-on in enterprise tiers so that they're
Right.
not even available at the small business level that a
Right.
lot of these businesses are subscribing to. So the things that we
Right.
would tell them, hey, make sure you do these things. Now they got
Mm-hmm.
to pay in another tier
Mm-hmm.
just to be able to get those things that
Mm-hmm.
should be effective.
Can you talk
Exactly.
more about that? Yeah, talk more about why they're getting bucketed with enterprise risk when they're not big enterprises.
Hmm.
I I think, I mean, from having worked in vendors before, obviously it takes, some effort to develop, the features for MFA and single sign-on and all these extra integrations to add the extra security features to the tools. But then when the product folks are working on putting together their product tiers as well, uh, they're looking at how do we bucket groups of features and create value to incentivize people to move up in the tiers. And unfortunately, a lot of times it's those security features that get bumped into the upper tiers because they think, well, that's an enterprise feature that the small business doesn't care about those, but they do now. The last several years, they do care about those, and it's becoming a little more common to see those, but I still see way too many cloud vendors that wanna put things like multi support for multi-factor authentication as an enterprise feature or support for single sign-on as an
Hmm.
enterprise feature so that
Hmm.
a small business who has Microsoft, M365 with maybe a small business
Hmm.
premium license, now they can't link that new app
Right.
with their identity that they already have, even though they've got the
Right.
tool in place as a small
Right.
business to do it.
And I know James has opinions.
Oh yeah. In addition to those paywalls that you put people, you put organizations behind, is you the vendors. Even if we're as an MSSP trying to help, we try to reach out to a vendor to say we want to buy your product and sell it, and they say, well, that's great. Here's 10,000 licenses, and it's like I'm just starting out, or I only have a few hundred that need it. What am I going to do with the rest of the licenses? And so by putting them behind minimums, that makes it really difficult um, for for people to even get help. And obviously, a lot of the big security companies, they want a small business to work through somebody. But again, then that provider is going to look at it from, well, there's no real margin in this for me. There's nothing in it, and maybe they don't even manage the product. So it's a very broken system that we have, and it's hurting small businesses immensely.
Hmm. Yeah. As VCSOs, Matt and Carlota, how do you make helping smaller businesses cost effective
Hmm.
and important for them as well as reasonable and actually effective?
And
I'll let you go,
gotta
Matt.
focus on value. I mean, you gotta focus on the business value. It
Hmm.
can't just be telling them, "Oh,
Hmm.
do X, Y, and Z." I like to start
Hmm.
with frameworks because at least that gives you a foundation, that is built to sort of try to mitigate risks that are sort of, I don't want to use the term generic, but kind of generic, that anybody
Hmm.
doing business in industry in these days is going to face similar risks at a base level that like something like the NIST CSF can help with. So I do like to start there, but we have to get creative. That's the next piece then that so many folks would fall short on without really truly understanding small business and the challenges, because small business folks, they have practically no budget, very very few
Right.
resources, but they have near
Right.
infinite flexibility. They can
Yes.
move quick, they can make changes,
Yes.
they can define whatever they want to do
Yes.
if you can help them get creative. Whereas a big
Yeah.
company, they've got resources, but they have very little flexibility generally.
Hmm.
So it's a really cool space to play in. And if
Hmm.
you can help them come up with creative ways to deal
Hmm.
with things in that framework, like one of the
Hmm.
areas is around um, separation of duties. Well, if you got a tiny little company that everybody has to lean in, you got to get creative sometimes with
Hmm.
how do you do separation of duties and still define a lightweight process that
Hmm.
put some checks and balances in place, but that you're not overburdening them. Because if you again in a small business too, they just got to get work done, and
Right.
if you're making their life difficult to get their work done, they're not going to do it.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I never wanted to have a client tell me, "Yeah, that's a great idea, but we're just not going to do that,"
Right.
because I've
Right.
recommended something that's not a fit for them. So,
Hmm. Hmm.
thankfully, that doesn't happen very often. I'm
Yeah.
usually pretty good
Yeah.
at figuring out the right way to suggest that they do things.
Yeah, and I think to Matt's point, like you really have to get to know the business, right? It's a
Mhm.
relationship, and it's It's a challenge. It's especially a challenge when, you know, well-known CISOs kind of poo on vCISOs as you're not even a security person, you're just a risk manager, or you're just a business consultant. And it's, you know, it's frustrating because cybersecurity is risk management. You know, if you look at the NIST cybersecurity framework, that's a risk management. That's a very specific risk management framework. Cybersecurity is about securing business outcomes, right? You're trying to get those very specific business outcomes through technology while reducing risk of using that technology, right? And so when you're talking about small businesses, there's so much that they can do for free. So I actually have a lot of like articles and guides on, hey, here's what you can do before you even engage me. Like, are you doing these things, right? So those kinds of things. Hey,
Like what?
like just turning multi-factor authentication on everything, you know, using a password manager and very, very good password hygiene. Now we're moving to passkeys, you know, and trying to explain the value of the passkeys, right? Patching your stuff. Those are the three big things, you know, passwords, patch, MFA. That will get
Absolutely.
you, any small business, 90% of the way there. And, you know, I know with a small business, and I do have some Series A clients. I do love to work with those sub 10 person companies. Fortunately, my Series A clients have actually grown to like 30 and 50 people. So I know I'm doing the right thing with those organizations when their marketing people call me before they call the IT person and say, hey, we want to use this tool. Is it safe? Right. So I know I'm getting through to them when they're asking, is it okay to use this? And I want every company to have that kind of faith in whoever is helping them with risk management and cybersecurity risk management.
Yeah.
It's that. It's also, thanks, Edwin. It's a great comment. This is so devastating for small businesses to face any kind of problem because what small
Mm-hmm.
business owner has a day of time to recover their business account through Facebook,
Right. Right.
right? I've experienced. There's nobody here in this conversation who
Right.
hasn't experienced some form of this pain,
Right.
and it is just incredibly difficult for them to.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Well, I even had like a 130 person company, right? This is not a big company, but it was an e-commerce platform that sold primarily through Facebook. And I had done a multi-factor authentication review with all of their marketing and sales team. I made sure that all of their accounts, and this was a frustrating thing with Facebook at the time. At the time, Facebook required people to use their personal accounts to manage business pages, right? I think they have since changed that. But that meant I had to rely on those folks when they turned on MFA to keep it on. Well, the Facebook ads account got hijacked, right? And while Facebook was on top of it and froze the account, they didn't give it back to the business for 8 days. And for a small business, that 130 person e-commerce platform was making bank. I mean, they were losing up to 200,000 a day that their Facebook ads account was held, right? For a small mom and pop business where maybe it's only a couple hundred a day or maybe 1,000 a day, that's the bulk of their income if that's where their audience is. Yeah. And
Exactly.
I didn't
And
realize they had changed that.
I believe they
'Cause
have. I haven't checked. I haven't confirmed it, but I will say that two of the marketing people disappeared after that because I sent the MFA review to the VP of engineering and the Facebook security team and said, "Hey, we did an MFA review 6 weeks ago. Here are the screenshots. Everyone's MFA was turned on." So two people decided to turn off their MFA, and they lost their jobs. Right. So
but
that's not good either.
when you take out a small business's capacity for revenue for
Hmm.
8 straight days and you're losing hundreds of
Hmm.
thousands of dollars a day and you have been instructed
Hmm.
to leave MFA on, but we also
Yeah.
see that there's a real problem in educating people who are inside small businesses. it's
Yeah.
it's one of the things that we
Yeah.
care about so much. Many times people get told to do something and they don't understand why they're being
Right,
told to do it.
right,
That's a
right.
real challenge. Yeah.
Context is critical at that point, right? If you
Mhm.
can get people to understand why, you get better buy-in because any friction you introduce to somebody else's process is an insurmountable obstacle, right? Any friction has the risk of being a showstopper, even a minor friction like MFA. So if you can get them to buy into the why of it, you can get them to accept that friction and reduce it, keep it from being an obstacle.
yeah, and knowing that is key too. So as you help them
Mhm.
design processes and pick tools, You pick tools that reduce friction overall, so it's a net win. And solving those other people's problems as well. It's a net win all around,
Yeah.
except for maybe that
Yeah.
one little thing.
Yeah.
And they decide, you know what, it's worth it to
Right.
gain that extra thing. But that trust of having them come to you to ask you, I mean, that's the dream for
Yeah.
CISO. It's
Yeah.
like that's
Right.
relationship building right there.
Right. Right.
Do you
Yeah.
have
And
that? Yeah, go ahead, please.
no, go right ahead. Ask the question.
Well, I was curious. One of the things that I have seen as we build Red Queen Dynamics, as we build the questions that we ask people each week, we're adding more and more questions and frameworks that are even specific to businesses and people that are developing out content to keep small businesses safe. This is so fascinating to me.
Mm-hmm.
I've had thousands and thousands of small business owners that I've had conversations with at this point. And it's so at the point at which they get to a VC, so often they have a specific compliance need, like you need to get me square with CSF, I need CMMC, CIS, whatever it might be, FTC safeguards. Many of them don't even know what they're supposed to be doing, right? FTC safeguards is the big one on that one. But for a lot of the small businesses I talk to, their first question is not even, and I was wrong about this. I thought for many of them it'd be about vendor relationships and enterprise revenue management. For a lot of them, they're just scared, really, really scared about getting hacked, about ransomware, because the awareness raising we've done has worked, and the solutions are there at the enterprise level, but we don't have those solutions at the small business
Right.
level.
Right.
How do
And
you manage their fear?
we're starting, well, I'm going to address the first and then I'm going to follow up with the second thought. Managing their fear is about them trusting you, right? And you acknowledging the fear. You can't brush that fear off. That's a very genuine emotion. People feel the way they feel. You need to accept it, address it, and work with it, right? So I find that education is the best way to manage that fear. And while CSF, NIST, SOC 2, ISO, whatever, all of those frameworks are fantastic. But for a very small business, or actually just for a business owner who isn't security, the NIST maturity framework, like the model is meaningless. It's meaningful to us as security practitioners. It means nothing. Absolutely nothing to a business leader, right? So I actually developed and have available for free under a Creative Commons license something I call the security health model. Because what I hated about the word maturity is it has this connotation that we get better at things and we don't. And I need the business leaders to understand that this is not just a technology issue. This is a culture and organizational awareness issue. There's all of these things that go into it. But more importantly, that if you stop doing things, you backslide. So, I talk about security health and I use a lot more analogies. You got to take the jargon out of it when you're talking to a small business because that adds to the fear, right? But what I am seeing gratefully in the marketplace are, vendors starting to pop up that are focused or that, if not focused on the small business, at least values them. So I don't know if you want me to say vendor names. There are vendors out there that, for example, do
Go for it.
identity management. Okay. Push security. I use them with my clients. Their first 10 accounts on Push Security are free. They do identity management across different cloud services, right? I think that's great. The first 10 accounts are free. If you're small and you're never going to be more than 10 people, you're always going to know where your folks are using their Google Workspace login, SSO, or their for those cloud services that you're not even managing, right? Dope Security, Civitar has licensing models for one person. Like that was my frustration when I first started vCISO work, is a lot of companies did not do less than 200 licenses. If I wanted less than 200 licenses, I had to go to a big shop like CDW or SHI. And they don't care about the small business any much more. They care a little more than, the security vendors, but not much more, right? And finding MSPs to work with, a lot of MSPs are very very Microsoft centric. I'm working with folks who grew up in the Google workspace, right? So either they're startups from Silicon Valley, they're more comfortable with Google, that's where they go, or they used Google, as their personal email growing up. The 20s and 30 somethings, they're primarily starting out in Google and not in Microsoft. Or if they get forced into Microsoft by like GoDaddy, they are furious about it. So,
Oh, they are.
it's
They are. And
not
that's
what they want to do. Right.
It is not. Yeah, Matt, how do you cope with the fear
I
coming from? And I'm in a minute, James, I'm going to ask you a little bit about that health
Hmm.
concept, and we need to have a conversation about brisket, I think. But Matt, yeah, how do you manage that
I
fear? Right?
I I actively try not to sell on FUD, like that fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Like it's very effective in the short run, but it's like negative reinforcement. It's going to become ineffective pretty quickly, and that's something that we as professionals just need to leave behind us. So I generally try to focus on the upside. So much like what Carlota was saying, uh, yes, these are bad things that can happen, but one of the things I know when people get stressed or when they're afraid, a lot of times it's around things that they can't control. They're going to stress about, there's this is basic human psychology stuff. If somebody is afraid, it's generally because there's an element there that they can't control something. So I try to give them that control back. It's like, yes, that bad thing could happen, but here's what we can do about it, and really try to focus on the positive and what we can do about it, by working that into people, process, and technology. So it's not all just purely about, spend all this money on these tools. What do we do with your people? How can we tweak your processes? Those types of things to mitigate this and make it less of a concern. Yeah, I do also help them understand that security is never an absolute. You don't just walk away. Yep, we're secure. We're done. That never happens. But to always follow the risk side with the upside very quickly of, but this is what we can do about it. This is not insurmountable. And
Yeah.
I've often said before, like, in the sales that we do, it's less about selling and convincing, because by the time they get to me, a need has been identified. Like we said, like this, there's been some sort of business driver that has them talking to me. I'm not convincing people that security is important. I'm convincing them, giving them the confidence that, like, we got this. This is not a big deal. And that's what a lot of these small business owners need
Yeah.
to kind of talk
Hmm.
them back off the ledge. Just give them that confidence that there is stuff that they can do about it, and it's not
Yeah.
going to cost them a fortune. And we can deal
Yep.
with this. We got it. You're not alone.
Yeah. And I know James has said some really similar things as well. Oh, you're muted, James. There you go.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've had customers come to us. Um, you know, they had a BEC happen. We have IT companies that we help out, and they come to us with these issues, and it's it's amazing how the I mean, it's nice because they come to us and then we try to treat them the best we can and we help them out. But it is kind of upsetting. It's sort of like, the person coming to me and saying, "Hey, I've already been in a car crash. Can you help me put the seatbelt on?" A little late. And and then when they come and they have a compliance-driven need, and they say, "Well, we need this done in 12 days, and we need it cheap, and we need this," and it's like you're not getting that. I often tell people, like, look, I like to barbecue. I like to make brisket, and brisket is a very long process. You can't just hurry it up by throwing it in your oven the last 2 hours, or halfway through and expect it to come out the way you want. So the best time to do the compliance or the security or anything was yesterday, and the next best time is today. And it's just trying to explain that to the small businesses, like Matt said, without creating the fear and uncertainty. I mean, um, I try to explain to people, kind of as a tabletop of this, the things that you lack. These are the things that can happen, and it's not so much, to get them to be afraid and sign. It's more that they can then make that, threat informed, risk based decision to tell me to, don't implement this. We're not buying it, or whatever. And then I can at least walk away from it and say, hey, they know what.
And more than that, I've always loved James's analogy on that one, because Carlota's example of health is so important, right? It is,
Mhm.
um, we explain to people when they answer their questions on Red Queen, that most people answer their questions most weeks, which is the idea, right? It's simple, easy, tiny steps that you take over time to do it. Every once in a while, I'll run across somebody or a business owner who doesn't they don't realize that they're supposed to be answering their questions every week, and that it takes them 18 seconds to do it. And so I'll talk to one of them and say, hey, you got a 3-person business. Nobody in your business has answered these questions for 2 months. And they're like, oh, well, we're going to get caught up next week on it. And the answer is no, you can't get caught back up again. You can't go back to last week and choose to do the push-ups and eat the broccoli that you didn't do last week. Last week was a week you needed to do a tiny bit of cybersecurity and you didn't do it. You can't fix that. You can't make a different choice before in time than you have made. And so the answer is, and you can't stack questions. There's not enough time. There's not enough energy in the day to solve all your problems. You got to do 1 or 2 at a time. And this is about doing a couple of push-ups and making a choice to sub in some vegetables every week from now on. Right? Yeah, Carlota?
Yeah, I mean, the whole health concept is it's so much easier to get through, right? One of the things I ask, are you going to have the same outcome eating a candy bar, a protein bar, and a chicken Caesar salad every day at lunch? Like, if you are consistently, if you're consistently eating that candy bar, you are consistently going to get worse outcomes. If you are consistently eating that protein bar, you're getting better outcomes, but you're still not getting as good an outcome as maybe if you're eating an actual chicken Caesar salad every day for lunch. You're getting the real protein and the real fiber, right? And that concept is so much easier to solve. And even when it comes to compliance, it's like, guys, I don't need you to have all of the security tooling in place. What I need you to do is to be consistent in your practices and have them documented. If you want SOC 2 and you want ISO 27001, I need you to get in shape.
James, it looks like you're having an absolutely great time on the floor out there. Is there anybody that we know wants to wave?
I think they all want to wave at us. They all want to wave at us.
I think they all want it. They all do. Exactly. That's a John.
Do you have any questions about compliance or anything that we could help you with?
Why? Why this? Why are you making horrible password recommendations? Why am I wearing this hat? Why does it match Kara's lipstick?
Hey,
okay, the hat is his poor life choice.
People know he ain't afraid of nothing. All right. Exactly. And I love that. John Strand, founder and CEO of Black Hills Information Security, wonderful human being, and the person running the conference out there. And, he's just such a great example as well in this field. This is it, right? How do you, why NIST is such a great question. Why do we keep having to try to make small businesses do something they don't understand, they don't want to do? They can't track it directly to revenue. They hate it when we pester them about it. And all we end up doing is looking like the jackasses over in the corner, trying to get them to comply with something that we haven't drawn a clear line between them and their business success with yet.
That's a great question. Go ahead, Matt.
I was thinking, this kind of ties in a little bit what you were saying a second ago, though, Carla, with documentation. Like, I've had customers, why do I need to document this stuff? Because NIST, SOC 2 says I need to NIST says I need to document that. Why do we need to documentation? We don't want to document. That's a waste of time. We just need to get the work done. And I have to explain to clients, documentation is very important if you want to do things consistently. If it's not written down, it's going to impact your ability to train people. It's going to impact your ability to improve your processes. If you can't write it down, you don't know what you do.
Yes.
So it's about
100%.
Operational excellence.
It is. And, the reason I tell people use NIST, right? Why does everyone use NIST? Why is NIST the standard? NIST is a standard because it's publicly peer reviewed and it's free. It's been proven, right? We know that it works. We know as security folks that NIST has best practices, that it's constantly being reviewed, that even people like Matt and myself can weigh in on, I comment on NIST things all the time, right? And it's really important that people understand I'm not just pulling this out of thin air. This is this is the U.S. government's own standard, right? This is a National Institute of Standards and Technology. And seeing it being adopted across the world is also fantastic. What's interesting to me, is kind of different reactions. I'm working with a Series A that's full of academics. They're all PhDs, right? PhDs and medical doctors. And you tell them NIST, and they're like, yes, I get it. You talk to a small, Silicon Valley company that's never heard of security, and you say, look, National Institute of Standards and Technology has this framework. Everybody uses it. And they're like, I don't know, is government okay? Like, the government does that. That's not for us. And it's like, yeah, it is, because it's a standard.
And great
standard,
question from the audience on this one from YouTube. And speaking of standards, NIST versus CIS, what's your preference for small business and nonprofit?
NIST.
I know Matt's
NIST.
got opinions on this one.
I'm using CIS right now with a client, and I don't generally, because it gets too prescriptive for me, and I feel like it is, if you're going to comply, you're either going to comply with the framework or you're not. But it's so prescriptive that by the time I start trying to customize it for the org, we may end up not actually being compliant with it, to a point where maybe it's best not to document that we're compliant with this framework. Whereas the NIST CSF is higher level and makes it a little bit easier to modify and customize things to what's going to work for that org, meet the spirit of what they're looking for. And it's also smaller. CIS has a lot more controls. It gets more fine grained than NIST does. So again, that prescriptive nature is good if you're in an org that really, really needs that. But if you've got somebody like us who can guide them through the best way to do something in the context of their business, that's why I gravitate to NIST. We have the academic rigor behind it. It's an authoritative source. I'm not making it up.
Right,
I didn't just make this one. Not out of thin air, like you said. And
right.
We can.
Right.
And it's rough, right? You got John Strand in the background going, "Why NIST? Why do you think this stuff?" Right? And then Carla, we all like NIST, but let's be real here. 800-170 CSF is too big for small businesses. It's why we use 7621, which is the small version of it.
This is true. But on the other hand, what I want to point out is CIS is hyper-focused on the technology. To Matt's point, people process technology. People process technology. We hear this all the time, and we don't understand necessarily where it comes from. That is a knowledge management, knowledge strategy concept that was developed by a bunch of consultants in the 90s, I think, from McKinsey. Larry Pruzak and a couple of other folks, I think, coined that, right? Knowledge strategy is aligning people, processes, and technology for specific outcomes. Cybersecurity is aligning people, processes, and technology for reduced risk and business outcomes, right? That's what it means. So when we're talking about using CIS, it is too focused for for a small business that may not be as tech savvy, especially for businesses that aren't tech savvy. CIS is it's overwhelming. To Matt's point, it's overly prescriptive.
It's huge. So we're going to say goodbye to James for the moment, as he's going to drop away and wave and preach the good news about CIS versus NIST over at Deadwood. So yeah, James, it was a pleasure having you with us. Thanks. Take off and go preach some gospel. And then Matt and Carlota, like give me your one word answer though. NIST or CIS? Which one? For small businesses.
I try to think on NIST. Customized, but based on NIST.
Yeah.
NIST.
I think, there's a direct answer to your question there, GM. Thanks so much for watching from YouTube. And I think really that is at least part of the answer. And when people need CIS, like when the student is ready, the CIS controls appear, right? And and I think that maybe is at least part of it, right? So it's a fascinating and interesting conundrum. So we had so much to talk about today. We barely even got a chance to talk about the .io issue. And I don't know if you folks had a chance to see this at all. So everybody started flipping out this week. .io, the top level domain, it's going to be going away in the next couple of years. And, we've got folks that inside, I'm going to call out, Lucas Guerin, Jeff Frosca, Tilda Lowengrove, incredible people on our team who 2 years ago were like, we're going to migrate away from .io, and that's a thing that's going to happen. And I was like, but the short URL that we have right now, and they were like, no, you're not going to want to be involved in that. We don't want to build our infrastructure around it because there are problems, there are colonialist implications in the Indian Ocean, TLD and stuff. So we migrated away from that a couple of years ago, thanks to the foresight of our engineers. But there's a lot of people flipping out this week. It's kind of crazy. I'm just kind of wondering if any of you folks have had anybody asking you any of those questions this week.
It hasn't come up yet, but I have multiple clients that are using .io domains, and I'm not sure that they're even aware that this is going on. I've been so buried in client work, I hadn't seen this yet.
I sent it to my clients and just checking in, because a lot of folks will actually, they'll have their .com for their marketing site and their .io for their application or platform if they're a SaaS provider, right, or a SaaS platform. And fortunately for me, none of my clients were using .io. So, and I don't think it was a deliberate, thought process behind it of, oh, that's a little colonialist, maybe we shouldn't do that. It was more of a, we didn't even think about that, right? That's just not where they were.
So I'm going to, we like to keep this nice and tight. There's just a couple minutes left in the broadcast this week. So I'm going to ask the last questions of each one of you. And I'm going to wrap into that actually a little bit, a question we got from Twitter, which is, what's the difference between a CISO and a vCISO? So as we wrap this all up, and before I ask you the last question on my list, which is a fun one, Matt, I would love you to answer the question, what's the difference between a CISO and a vCISO? And then let us know, maybe paste it in the comments, and let us know where and how to find you and why people should come and talk with you. So what's the difference and how do people find you?
Yeah. So a CISO generally works full-time for an organization, maybe part-time, whereas a vCISO is usually on a fractional basis for multiple companies. So, they're not all dedicated to a single company. They're probably going to have multiples. Very similar to virtual CFOs and other fractional executives that have become common in other functions. We're seeing the same thing here. And then, folks like me, the VC, so a lot of times will still own the program, though. They're named as the security officer, even though it's on a fractional basis in an organization that maybe doesn't need a full-time CISO yet. And what I do at Fosivity, though, I don't get named as that. I'm there to coach and guide. So I'm more of a vCISO advisor rather than a fractional CISO. And I'm here to coach and guide. So if, especially for CISOs that have found themselves in the role who didn't really plan on taking this role, may have come into it, accidentally.
Right.
And they're needing help. They need somebody to help coach and guide, and also maybe help with some implementation and execution. So, I offer the advisory services for that, and then also can do some implementation stuff on project basis, like, assessments, policy work, process documentation, process improvement, those types of things to help them actually get things implemented. And they own it, and they get the credit for it. I'm just there to help and make them successful. Where can they find me? Fosivity.com, FOCIVITY.com is the website for my company. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. There, Fosivity has a page and LinkedIn, and then my podcast, the Mindful Business Security Show, mindfulsmbshow.com. The host makes you put the www in front of it. So, but that's another place where you can find me as well.
I think the difference.
So yeah, Carlota, if you can pop in and answer the exact same questions, that'd be lovely. Go for it.
I think the difference between a CISO and a vCISO is how much sleep they get at night. Like, right? How much quality sleep. I mean, the advantage of being, and to Matt's point, I too am an advisory kind of CISO. I don't do any hands-on changes. I don't access anyone's systems. I do a lot around general technology risk management, virtual CTO, and virtual CISO work. So, the difference is my plan, my effort with a small client is to grow them to the point where I can help them hire their first full-time CISO I call that graduating my client, right? And that full-time CISO now doesn't have to spend their first year unfucking everything, pardon my French, but their first year can now be spent building the security team that they want to build to protect the company, right? So I think the difference is just, we're trying to help we're doing the same kinds of things, but we're doing it for different size companies.
That is absolutely fabulous. All right. So it has been a wonderful and incredible show with the both of you. I am just joy-filled that we got the great questions that we did from all over the place. Questions from I think this is the first week we got multiple questions from Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, all of the places. And they're all really focused in, I think, and this is the important one, on how we keep small businesses safe. This has been just a really challenging couple of years for small businesses, and they're starting to have to pay attention to something that they don't want to, right? Any more than I think anybody, on this call right now really wants to spend a whole lot of time digging into the intricacies of accounting or tax law or, contracts management, right? Like that's not what we do for a living. And it's something that we hope we find people that we can trust and build great relationships with to give us good advice about. And I feel like both Carlota and Matt have been absolutely incredible in providing that perspective for us this week. So, folks, I really look forward to speaking with you again this next week. We're going to be talking yet again about cyber insurance. We're going to speak a little bit more about what it means to be secure in rural parts of America, where the challenges can be a little bit different when it comes to physical security for your small business, even though that's part now of cybersecurity. So, Matt, Carlota, thank you so very much. It's been a real joy and a pleasure having you with us this week. Folks, as always, I cannot wait to speak with you in future. Let us know if there's anything we can do to serve you. We're going to have a great time this week. Stay safe, everybody out there. We'll talk to you very, very soon. Bye just for now.